Welcome to Music and Medicine. Welcome to Music and Medicine.
Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis.
Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis. I'm excited and delighted to be here with Bill Meyers. He is a musician, orchestrator, arranger, producer. He has worked with everybody, from Lou Rawls to Brian McKnight, Madonna to Ariana Grande, Justin Timberlake, the list goes on, Michael Jackson. We could go on for days, but we are so delighted to be here and have the pleasure to be able to meet with you.
Thank you.
I want to just look back in time and just start. I know you grew up in a big city playing the organ of all things. That's not a typical instrument for a young person.
No. I started out as a child. I was born first.
Right. Okay. We did have that.
No, honestly, my parents bought an organ. They were watching Lawrence Welk, and no one played the thing. It just sat there.
Sure. Okay.
And a woman moved in in my neighborhood. And they said, why don't you take lessons?
Sure.
And at the time, I was kind of getting in trouble at school.
Right, okay.
Before psychologists made a ton of money off ADHD medication.
Right.
They said I was hyperactive and I was a class clown. I was getting in trouble.
Sure.
And they tested me at University of Chicago, and they said he's got a real high IQ, and here's what we want you to do. We want you to find things that he can excel at,
Right.
apart from school,
Right.
and push him to do it. And then you're going to find that as he does that and learns how to discipline himself in those endeavors,
Right.
his schoolwork will get better. And it helped.
Right. Well, there's a medical story right there. I mean, within not even realizing it, that's exactly something today that's done with autism and even kids with ADHD. Yeah. Did you yourself, I don't know if you would be this insightful, but realize that the music was sort of helping to calm you, but also allow your talents?
So. I was a bit of a class clown,
right.
And I wasn't applying myself. And so, but my parents were wonderful. They backed, when they saw I had talent. My dad was an amazing athlete,
sure.
and I ended up being pretty fast and pretty good. So they pushed me. I love basketball, but I was too small. But I got pretty good at tennis, and I actually had a coach, and I won a couple city tournaments. So that was going on, and then the music started. And my dad used to like family board games, but he also was a veteran of World War II.
Right.
And so he kind of gave me a love of military history, and he would let me purchase board games and learn the rules and teach him. And that really locked in preparing in tests and other things like that, you know. Right. So all that stuff I think helped me, helped move me forward. The organ. This woman, I thought she was going to teach me Skater's Waltz or something.
Right, something really slow.
Immediately got me into classical music, and I fell in love with it. It was tremendous. It was Bach and those kind of composers, and it kind of how can I put this? It not ruined me, but spoiled me, in that pop music sounded like garbage to me for a little while,
right?
Because I was playing this really highly organized music.
Right. And did you think it was because it's so, either you move around a lot, you've got footwork and you've got handwork going on all at the same time?
That's very important. I was going to get to that, because as a piano player, people are using both hands, okay, and they're fluid up and down the keyboard. But I think why I became an arranger and an orchestrator is I had a good sense of rhythm, and you've got pedals moving independently and different keys, and parts going, and it lends itself eventually to see how movement is necessary, and I think you think differently than grabbing something, big chords. Don't stay stationary. It's linear. It's much more linear. And so when I went to school, I went on a scholarship, and it was a major in organ. And by my second year, I was like, I don't want to play in church. I mean, I started playing in clubs. I got a Hammond B3. And here's another thing. I grew up in a lily white suburb. I didn't know a single person of color. And the first person I met when I went to college became one of my best friends and still is today. His name is Paul Wilson. And he got me into jazz. I fell in love with Oscar Peterson. And it was a great blues town and R&B town. And, it just my ability to comprehend other styles grew.
Right,
And
exponentially.
So my major changed. You
Right.
know? Like then I became an orchestration major.
Right. And then what was that big break? What was that moment where you were realizing, gosh, I'm performing with so-and-so and this is, I'm on my way?
First big break came, and again, really lucky for this. I was in my junior year, headed in my senior year. And I'd listened to, radio, and I'd heard this singer that was quite good, Gino Vanelli, had a great voice.
Right.
And it just so happened one night I was playing at a club and they had a dance review.
Right.
And there was a guy in the background and he's playing guitar and it sounded really good. And I come up, I go, hey brother, that sounds really good. And he says, yeah, I hear you, you sound good too. And it was Ross, his brother. We wrote a few songs.
Right.
I made some demo tapes.
Right.
I got a guy to back me. He really liked what I was doing.
Right.
And next thing I knew, I get a call. I got 16 hours left to finish DePaul University.
Right.
And it's Gino. And he's heard my demo tape. This is amazingly right on time.
Right.
It broke my mom's heart because he called me from the '76 Olympics.
Wow.
And he got in a fight with his band and fired them all. And he heard my tape and said, "We want to fly up here."
Wow.
And then
and where were they at that time? Just to remind people, 76. What city?
In Montreal. When
Right.
they had the Olympics.
Right.
And Gino was from Montreal.
Right. Okay.
So his band really kind of screwed him, but they had desperately wanted a raise.
Right.
You know, and they weren't making very much. And the weird thing I found out is I had gotten paid almost double of them. Could have kept his band, really.
Right,
you know.
if he was willing.
But I got this break, and I remember calling my mom, and there was this silence on the phone. Man, I'm gonna do a world tour, and I'm gonna do a record, and I'm doing this, and then I hear,
sure,
you're not gonna get your degree,
right.
you know, and I'm like, it's a liberal arts degree.
Sure, but it doesn't mean anything.
You know, I could put it in my birdcage. So that began my journey.
Sure.
You know, I learned a lot from them. Their work ethic was off the charts. The sonority and the live sound was incredible. You know, and it got me out to L.A. because A&M was the parent company.
Right.
And then I went back, and this gentleman, his name was Jerry Wolf, had some money, was a pretty wealthy accountant, but he liked what he heard, and he fronted me for some album, some extra cuts.
Right, actually.
And I made 5 songs, and fortunately, all 5 got placed with artists eventually.
Right, right. And who were some of the big artists that you worked with just those early years?
Well, I went from that because Gino, unfortunately, had to take a hiatus, and I worked with Lou Rawls for a minute. And then while working with Lou Rawls, my demo tape was out, and Jerry found out that one of Maurice White's siblings worked at a recording studio, and got him the tape.
Wow.
And they loved 2 of the songs. I mentioned to you how much I respected and loved my parents and my dad.
Right.
The finest man I ever knew, and he always said, "Your word is your bond. Your word is your bond."
Right.
And boy, has that messed me up in this business.
Something today that I don't know if the kids know exactly what that means. But.
So when I got out there, I met Harvey Mason, who was on the lot, and heard us rehearsing, and anyhow, the tape got to him, and he loved a song I had called "Here Today and Gone Tomorrow," and it would feature him on drums, and my heroes, Stanley Clarke played bass, Lee Ritenour on guitar, Bill Chaplin singing. He says, "Man, I'll let you do the string and horn arrangement, I'll let you play solos on it." And then I get a call from Maurice White.
Wow.
And he likes 2
Himself.
or 3 of the songs and wants to write with me.
Right. Wow.
And they're doing I Am. They're at the peak of their, you know, the height of their experience, you know, with the crowd selling out, and you know, I Am went almost quadruple platinum.
Right.
So I get to meet David Foster for the first time in the studio, you know, and I write with Maurice, and we wrote a song called "Can't Let Go."
Okay.
I wrote a song with Ross Vanelli called "Where Do We Go From Here?" They cut that for Philip.
Right.
And that's an interesting story because they held it, and they held it, and they held it, and I thought, well, I got 2.
Right. It's coming. It's coming.
And David comes to me one day, and Maurice, and they go, "We love Here Today, Gone Tomorrow. We might want to start the record with that." And I go,
wow. That would be a dream come true.
I gave that to Harvey.
Okay.
And I remember calling my dad that night, and he just listened to me, and he just looked, and he said, "Well, did you give him your word?" Oh, God. Yes, I did.
Right.
He goes, "I think you got your answer."
Right.
And it was a marvelous experience to work with those great musicians in Harvey, and he sold about 25,000 records, and Earth, Wind & Fire sold 4 million.
Right. By comparison. Right.
All right.
Sure.
Where do we go from here looked like it was going to go on, but they pulled another song that David and Bill Chaplin and Jay Graydon wrote called After the Love Is Gone.
Right.
And it wasn't going to go on because they were fighting for publishing.
Right.
And they told Reese they didn't want to give up any of the publishing they had. And he finally went, it's so good, I got to give it up. That bumped my song.
Right.
So at one point, I had 3 songs, then
Right.
I got down to 1. I learned a valuable lesson.
Right.
So,
Right.
and then shortly after that, I realized I think I could make a living in LA, come out. So I
Came
moved
there.
out.
Right.
Moved out in 80.
And then tell us, what does an arranger do? Because I think people may hear these kinds of words, but it's not something that's intuitive if you're not in the business.
If you write a song and it's on guitar, but you want to have a whole bunch of people play it with a larger sound, you're going to get an arranger to help you with that.
Right.
You're going to have him write parts for other musicians. He might do a vocal arrangement and help you with background vocals. If it's a larger production, then it would include not just initially in the old days, it was you would cut live with a rhythm section. Now everything kind of goes. A lot of things go through computer. Okay.
Right.
But in those days, you'd cut with a rhythm section and do overdubs and bring in other musicians. You might add horns or strings. All those things would be done generally. If a person didn't do it himself, he would have to hire other people to do it. That's what an arranger's job is, to enhance the quality of the sound and the song.
Before we get to somebody like Madonna, tell us a story of maybe 1 or 2 of the artists you work with that were amazing, and a couple where you're like, oh my gosh, this was so difficult, where you can say.
You know what? Nobody was really terribly difficult. You know, as it went on and I got more and more success, they need you. They're not. I mean, they could throw it away and then they just wasted $10,000 for a large string date or something else. But that never happened. Okay, so that was good. This is my guidepost for arranging.
Okay.
Okay. David Foster is one of the most talented people I've ever met in my life.
Absolutely.
And he's got his detractors, but you know what? Whatever he puts out, he's generally right.
Right.
And he was a mentor to me. He was the one that said, "Don't be stupid. Put this on this record."
Right.
And he was blown up as a producer at that very moment, and he couldn't go out on tour with Boss Scaggs.
Right.
And Boss had gone through some trouble, got through a divorce, and he kind of hit a low. But this was after he'd had Silk Degrees, which was record of the year.
Right.
So it'd been almost a year and a half. And he was going out with the guys from Toto that were working on their first record.
Right.
The greatest pop drummer I've ever worked with, hands down, is Jeff Porcaro. Okay? Incredible feel. Okay? It's going to lead to you the story here that explains my arranging experience and how it changed because of him.
Right.
So we went out. I'm gonna tell you another story. My father, when I was 9, said, "Hey, let's go get a milkshake," and he took me out, and we went to a hospital. And I'm like, "Well, I put the lights in here,
Right.
and I'm thinking they make good milkshakes." You know?
Right.
He brought me upstairs and he showed me somebody going through a heroin withdrawal. It was before I was ever a musician.
Right.
And he just said, "Hey, look, it's going to take you this far, and either you're going to die from it or you have to go through that."
Right. Interesting.
That messed me up. And I haven't done drugs.
Right. Right.
And so here I'm out with Boss Scaggs, and they're giving me my per diem,
Right.
okay, and a big white packet.
Exactly.
And I look at him and I go, "Can I trade that in for more money?"
Exactly. Because I don't.
Because
need it.
the guy said to me,
Right.
"That's worth more
That's
than
your
what I just
allotment.
gave, the $700 I gave you for per diem."
Right. Right.
And then my nickname apparently with some of them was Snow White. It
Right.
was-
Right. Because.
Okay, but I'm like I'm 24 and I'm
Sure.
like, or whatever. I mean, anyhow. So Jeff, I had Jeff's number, and I put a band together, and it was a good band. They were all Vinny Colaiuta on drums,
Wow.
Neil Steubenhaus on bass, Carlos Rios on guitar, and a very talented singer that I co-wrote material with, and we both sang.
Right.
His name was Guy Thomas. And as we did our demo, at the last day before we went in at Ocean Way, who
Right.
Alan Sides has always been a mentor of mine who owned that studio, gave us time there, but we had spent $1,000 to go track over the weekend.
Right.
And Vinny got called by Frank Zappa.
Oh. Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, because
No.
he's played with
Yeah,
everybody.
sure,
Okay.
right.
And we don't have our drummer.
Just like that.
So I called Jeff. I had that number, and Neil was also friends with him. He mentioned it also. Can he track with us for that stuff? And he came out. And I said, "Well, listen, we'll pay you, and we'll get pay your card." He said, "Fuck you," which I didn't know if he was mad at me. if
Right.
he was
Or
saying,
that's just what he says.
He just was going to do it for free to help us.
Right.
And I remember we got to a song, and it was a ballad. really good ballad called Woman. And Guy was in the booth with the lyrics and everything. He looks at me and I give him a drum chart. He goes, "Where's the lyrics?" And I said, "Well, they're in the booth with Guy. You want it?" And he goes, "Yeah." So I get them and I bring them back and I go, "I'm just curious. Why do you want the lyrics? I got to give you a drum sheet."
Right.
And he took my head on that joint. Puts it down. He goes, "Don't you get it? It's all about the fucking lyrics. If you want to be an arranger,
Right.
you honor those lyrics." That stayed with me the rest of my life. That changed everything.
Do you feel when you bring big orchestrations, and obviously Papa Don't Preach is a perfect example of that, to a song, it really elevates its ability to become a hit? It's almost, I wouldn't say a key element, but one of those that if it's left out, it could be a mistake.
Think of it more like a top basketball team or even a football team. It's got to be mixed right.
Right.
It's got to be written right. It can't be too long. It's got to have a hook.
Right.
Okay. The performances have to be terrific. The vocal has to, be evocative, and then everything that's done behind it has to support it. So there's a lot of elements,
Right.
to it.
Here we are with Bill Meyers, just looking at what he calls his wall of shame. I really think it's a wall of fame, but it's just some amazing hits. And just right off the bat, you've got...
These are nice. They're nice furniture. I mean, they're great to have. And to be honest with you, there was a time where they gave them to us.
Right.
And I probably have about maybe 10 or 12 that I don't want to pay for. I played on the soundtrack to, oh God, was it the Dancer? Yes. And what was the dancing movie that Maniac was in?
Flashdance?
Yes, Flashdance.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're hard to chase down now. They're incredibly expensive.
Right.
And the record companies, it just shows you how much things have changed. They used to actually just give them
Be
to
so
us,
happy what you had done for that.
So this is one of the most talented guys I ever worked with. He could do it all. He loved his weed. Let's put it that way, okay? Whitney, I had a couple interesting experiences. I worked on 2 records of hers. And at the time, I think she showed up with a girlfriend. And this was pretty early into it. This is like I'm Your Baby Tonight. And I worked on horns, another song called I'm Knocking. Right. And then I worked with her many years later, and she's down here somewhere. Toward the end. Much more used to the business. Kind of similar, Ariana, same thing. Man, you could just tell she's refined now. She's been through everything.
Become more sophisticated.
So it was a real thrill to work it with her. This is the first record I got a gold or platinum record for, and that's Earth, Wind & Fire, an incredible band, and I learned so much from them. And my mentor was Maurice White, and we worked together and have been friends for over 35 years. This is the one my mom loves the most. I worked on Ostracized.
Exactly. Gotta make mom proud. So
unbelievable. Everybody looked like a Disney character too when I worked there.
Exactly, that was a requirement.
And they said to me, this is just a little exercise record. That thing sold for 10 years.
Wow.
I worked for next to nothing.
Hey, right. Exactly.
Madonna, my first #1 string song was Papa Don't Preach. And she let me work on 3 of her #1s. Yeah. And I toured with her and did Live Aid, and wonderful. Yeah. Michael Jackson, it was the last record he worked on.
Sure. Wow.
And I got a last-second call on that one, but I'm thrilled that I was able to do it. Sure. Ray's, I wrote some interludes, and I wrote the horns to Let's Groove. That was my first #1.
What were some of your takeaways in working? Because, here are 2 musicians that, as you're saying, were at the peak of their career.
Yeah.
And so musical in terms of...
Well, they all had... You could see why they were successful. You would get into completely different styles, and amazing. It just... here's another wonderful person, man, and just smart as a whip. And I got to work on a couple cuts on this record.
Right. And who's the artist that did that one?
Justin Timberlake.
Right, sure.
His Justified record. The Crimea River on that one. That was his biggest hit. I worked on the soundtrack to Life, and I got to work with the strange and crazy, I Believe I Can Fly. What's his name?
Sure, R. Kelly.
R. Kelly.
Yeah.
He didn't know what he wanted.
Sure.
And I worked on it with a couple of artists for him.
Right.
I remember on a phone conversation, I was asking him a couple questions, and I guess he wouldn't talk to me. He had somebody speak to me.
Right.
And then they would say, well, if you've got to ask too many questions, then maybe you don't know what you're doing.
Sure. That's
I said, well, truly, actually, I do.
Sure.
I can help. You know?
And that was a good point that you had raised, that sometimes the artist may not realize that the team that's been surrounding them is not a bunch of amateurs, even though they may not realize the level that they've risen to.
And he was working in Chicago, because he's from Chicago, and I will tell you a funny story there. I knew an engineer, and they were at CRC, Chicago Recording Company.
Right.
And he got on the phone, because I said, hey, you're going to send me the files, and great to talk with you. And I said, how'd it go with him? Because he's an imbecile. Right. He says that he walks around with a camera following him everywhere, and we were doing a string quartet on something, and they asked him to say something, and he went to the booth, and he said, get the big guitar player. That was the cellist.
Right.
He says, to play louder. Get the big guitar. Get the big guitar to play louder. So.
Okay, right. So there's
Genius.
right.
Yeah.
Sometimes too smart for their own good.
Brian is a good friend and one of the most talented people I know. Back at One was his biggest hit, and
Right.
I did the orchestra on that. Ariana, Babyface got me on that, and I did three songs with Ariana Grande. Did strings, including the single "Tattooed Heart."
Right. He had discovered her, or because you mentioned Babyface.
Yeah, I think so. They signed him. On this side, I don't know if you remember "Fly Like a Bird," Nelly Furtado. She was a joy to work with. It was really fun.
Sure.
So I worked on a couple cuts on that.
And when you say something like that, though, what does that mean? Because it sounds like she was very funny, very hilarious. Had
She
a lot of
was. She was
positivity at
just
ease.
real cool. She wasn't full of herself. She was enjoying the ride.
Right.
And I think that's probably the biggest thing. She might have one more hit.
Sure.
You know, but the crew that worked with her were really talented. And just you know when you walk in, you just get the vibe. You know. Kenny had a lot of success, Babyface.
Sure.
And I worked on For the Lover in You on that record.
Sure.
This was another band that he produced called As Yet.
Sure.
More Brian McKnight cuts. Quincy, I got, you know what, you were either in Quincy's camp or you were in Maurice's camp. And some guys were lucky to do both.
Right.
I never quite got in Quincy's camp, but he appreciated my skills.
Right.
And I've written about 120 songs that got recorded. Sure. And one of them was on that original demo tape that I did.
Right.
And he took 2 songs, but they only put one on, and it was called Heaven Bound.
Right. Wow.
And then years later, he called me when he was working with Donna Summers, which is somewhere around here.
Sure.
I think it's up there. And this was kind of an interesting situation.
Sure.
I met Donna, really nice lady, but a little limited with her musical experience. And he was looking for something. He said, Bill, I know you've got classical experience. Can you write something like Could It Be Magic that Barry Manilow did, where you combine a classical piece with it? And I said, sure. Here's the problem. She wants to write on it with you.
Okay.
Oh, well, we'll try it. Okay, fine. Sure. So I brought Litz, and I brought Brahms, and I brought all kinds of composers, and I started playing little things. She goes, oh, forget that. We're just going to jam.
Right.
How do you jam a classical piece, right? Sure. So, okay, so I remember I play a chord, and she'd go, now I'm singing like a soprano.
Right. Wow.
Now I'm singing like a man.
Oh,
and we went like 45 minutes of this.
Wow.
I got nothing, and I went back to Q and said, I'm really sorry, I couldn't get anything,
Right.
He goes, it's the same old crap. Just write what you want. Find me something.
Sure. Wow.
And so I kind of got an inspiration. I got to work with Richard Page from Mr. Mister.
Sure.
Great songwriter himself, okay?
Wow.
And so I came up with an idea that I took a Bach 2-part invention and then wrote a melody on top of it. And we called it The Mystery of Love, down through the ages, It goes on and on.
Right.
And he loved it, so he cut it with her.
Oh, awesome.
Okay? I worked on Dick Tracy. I did a couple of songs, that were in that style with her.
Right.
Neil Diamond,
Right.
Bobby Caldwell, who wrote What You Won't Do for Love. Incredible writer. We wrote about 4 or 5 things. He was so cool, and he got that to Neil Diamond.
Right. Wow.
And when I was working on my album Images, Neil came in and said, thank you for writing that great song. So, really nice, genuine guy. Okay? I worked with a rock group called the Bullet Boys. They were real nice. This is a funny one. See up there?
Sure.
In God We Trust. I think it's Striper.
Yeah.
I swear to God, if you watch, what's the, Spinal Tap. It
Spinal
had
Tap, right.
it had moments of that. Okay,
Yeah, that was
really
awesome.
nice kids.
Right.
And there was one leader in the band, and his name was Michael, and he said, "Listen, yeah, I know you do sequencing. We want to sequence a track and be a little more modern." But and his drummer had the long blonde hair and the whole thing, hair down to his ass, and everybody. Well, I tracked with them. I played piano on this song.
Mm-hmm.
They were off the beat like second measure. Just like, forget it, okay. you
Right,
know.
no.
Then they said, "We've got this other song we want you to do. Can you give us really interesting lush strings, And it was a pretty simple song. I could
Right. Here.
got lazy perfect pitch and
Sure.
I've got relative pitch, so it's pretty easy once you learn four chords. So I remember coming in there and playing it. And I was putting parts on it, and
Right.
adding extra tracks with one of the Fairlight,
Right.
one of the sequencers of that time. And this was hilarious. So I took a coffee break and I went out. And as I was drinking my coffee, the drummer, again, a really nice guy, had a girl on each side, and he's got cross medallion, and the whole thing. He comes in and he goes, "Man, that stuff you were doing was really, really cool." He says, "I don't know how you do it. How did you learn our song so quickly? 3 chords." I said, "Well, I heard it a few times and I kind of got a handle on it." And he goes, and those parts just sound so cool. They sound like George Washington music. And I'm thinking, what the hell is he? And it dawned on me, that was the oldest guy he knew, and that was his interpretation of classical music.
Wow. Yeah.
So a little levity there.
sure.
But, so that's some of it. There's a lot of Earth, Wind, Fire records because I worked on about six of them.
Right.
And yeah, there's ones I haven't. I told you that I had done Flashdance and I worked on Dreamgirls, and there's about another 8. Where are you gonna put them?
At least right. Sure.
What was it like to work with Madonna?
Oh, I had a great time. I got a bunch of good stories out of it too, No, I admired her. That was a great experience. And I want you to know something. There's a couple other keyboard players that were friends of mine in Chicago, and they're both marvelous. One is Pat Leonard, who you no doubt might know. And Pat was leading that tour and asked me to be on it.
Oh,
But
wow.
he had also worked with the Jacksons. And he's very prolific and successful producer.
Sure.
And a piano player by the name of Randy Waldman, who worked with Streisand and played all the scores in movies and stuff like that. We're all from the same city. So I caught a break because he became music director after he'd done the Victory Tour for the Jacksons.
Jackson's, right.
And so I remember going to the first rehearsal, and she was nervous. I could see it.
Right.
She usually performed to a beatbox, or a tape where she sang over it or something.
Right.
And I looked at her again. Now by this point I was like 30,
Right.
and I'd already done tours with Lou and him, and I worked with Ricky Lee Jones for a minute, and I'd worked with George Duke. I toured with him. I did a couple tours. So I look at her and I go like this, come over. She looks at me and I said, "Smile, man, have a good time. We're all on your team."
Right.
And I think that really broke the ice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then she found out that I was, by the way, that was around 84 to 85, and that was like my best year. Everything broke out.
Right.
I mentioned to you earlier about my friend Paul Wilson, who I met in Chicago at school at DePaul. He became a very incredibly successful jingle company. That's where you put music to commercials. Like Fly Me Back. And in that year, he made me a $250,000 start offer, and I would make 50% of jingles that were successful, and I could sing on them and I could perform. And that was the very year everything else broke for me. Leading up to that, I continued my relationship with Maurice White, and he started letting me arrange. And my first number 1 was Let's Groove. I did the horns on Let's Groove, which was a tricky assignment, but it came out great. And then here I'm meeting Madonna, and she's the newest thing.
Right.
I mean, everybody's covering her.
Right.
Okay. While that's going on, Maurice has called me back, and we end up doing my first score, which was Armed and Dangerous, the John Candy movie.
Right.
Okay. I get approached by Alan Sides. They want to form a direct-to-disc company, and they want to make a demo tape, and they want to give me a whole side with a full orchestra. Well, that turned into my Images record.
Right.
And I got Grammy nominated for that. How can I go home now? Right? I couldn't do it.
As in home to Chicago.
What a year.
Right.
Okay. So we finally started touring, I'll tell you another funny story is that she found out that I was, having success as an arranger and things like that.
Right.
And so she says to me, can I come over because and she worked harder than anybody I knew.
Right. And
She
she
didn't have a
being
great
Madonna, I
voice.
just want to put that in there.
She was Madonna with that great personality and a good songwriter. She could find a hook
Right.
like nobody.
Mm.
Okay. Didn't have a great voice, but I always thought, well, she's moving so much. I'd see her in the studio, so I was saying,
Right. Right.
she's not the greatest singer, okay,
Right,
but
sure.
she worked so hard. She got the most out of everything that she had. I admire her. And when she was there, she was brash, So I was getting keys for these songs that she was going to work on with her. And we got up, and I was sharing the house with a couple of friends who had their own gold records, so it looked like I
Right.
had 1,000 records, and I
Right.
didn't. Right? And she says to me, you're the only man in the band. And I said, well, thank you. She says, they're all boys. She says, if you ask me out, I won't say no.
Exactly.
But I learned about Madonna is if you're too nice to her, you're going to get steamrolled.
Right. Right. You've got to
Okay.
be able to.
So I
Have a
kind
backbone.
of, you're just a bad boy and me. I've got
Right.
the angel on one side and the
Exactly.
devil on the other. So I look at her, well, thanks, but, I kind of like to lead when I dance.
Right.
And let that sit. And she went, well, don't wait too long. Don't wait too long.
Right.
Then she swore at me and she started to leave and
Right.
I ran to her and I was just joking with
Sure.
her. Yeah, maybe
Right.
sometime we could, go out.
Right. And what happened the next day?
Well, a week later,
Next week?
okay, because we were doing rehearsals, she had a terrible night.
Right.
Her choreographer abandoned her for Wham. And we had a great guitar player, David Williams, who played all the guitar work for Quincy, like "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough."
Right.
But he's late to his own funeral, always late. Okay. And
Right.
he showed up 45 minutes late. She fired him, so she was crying in a corner. And I came over
Right.
to her and I just said, "Hey, I know it's been a rough night. How about going out for a cup of coffee?" She goes, "I don't drink coffee." Well, how about some tea? Okay. And she wiped her eyes.
Right.
She said, "Well, that's really nice of you. And can I do it another time?" And I said, "Sure. Yeah,
Right.
okay." And she met Sean Penn 2 days later.
Right.
And it's okay
That's
for
so
me because I
strange.
actually did get through a tour because I think
Right.
after a while, you can't go up against
Bit of
all
fire
that
and ice.
energy and
Right.
stuff all
Exactly.
the time.
Sure.
But she'd heard my Images record, and I was using 26-piece string section,
Right.
and I'd already did. Oh, the other thing I'd done before Papa Don't Preach was "Miss You Like Crazy" for Natalie Cole,
Right.
and that went #1.
Yes.
So she got me to do Papa Don't Preach, Live to Tell, and Oh Father. So I had 3
Right.
#1s with her.
Right. Which is incredible.
She treated me great.
Sure. Brian McKnight.
Oh, we did Live Aid.
Right. Oh, yes. That's right. Yes.
We did Live Aid, and that was pretty amazing too. Okay.
When you're on that large of a stage and giving back to the community at that type of level, how does it feel? Just in terms of some of that exhilaration that's personal as opposed to it just being about a paycheck.
Oh, it's wonderful. It really is. I mean, the road gets tiring. There's no doubt about
Right.
it. I always say to my friends, if I never eat a honey roasted peanut again in my life,
Right.
it's too soon. Won't
Right.
ever, all those flights with the stupid, But and it takes its toll. And I toured off and on for 10 years, and that was enough.
Right.
That was fine. But it's exhilarating, especially when you're working with such high.
Right.
I'll tell you Jeff
Intense.
Porcaro's story.
Sure.
So Boz was coming back to San Francisco. Remember, he'd been divorced.
Right.
And there was a song, because he was not only touring off of the success of the Grammy Award a year and a half before, but he had a new record coming out called Middleman. And there was it was called Down, Two, and to the Left. That's what it was. But Middleman was the opening song. It was an odd one because it started out like "Jabba-dabba-da-da-da" on a guitar. "Da-ba-da-ba-da-da, bum, 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 bum." I'm playing the piano
Sure,
to
of
that
course,
when I
right.
come in. Now, it was an all-star lineup.
Sure.
You've got Jeff Porcaro, you've got Steve Lukather, you have, Lenny Castro, 3 of the best background singers, The band was stellar,
Smoking.
just smoking. But this night, for some reason, Boz wanted to start the song off, and he looked like he'd probably drunk and was buzzed.
Exactly.
okay?
Of course.
And so he goes, "We're going to do my song, Middleman." And he starts, "Jabba dabba da da." He's up here.
Right.
Jabba dabba. I got to go with him now.
Right,
Bum,
sure.
bum, bum, bum. And I look at Jeff, and he's like mad. He's mad.
Right.
And we're, "Babba dabba da da
Sure.
da." ba-da-ba-da, it kind of half swings.
Right,
And Jeff goes into the first verse with ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba, and he was saying, fuck, as he hits the cymbal, right? And we're riding on it.
Right.
And we're playing. And I'm just playing my part, he's playing his part. And we go, it was like a double verse with a little bit of a B section leading into the main chorus. And I remember the fill going back into it is ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba. And as we did it, and I went to the chorus, I suddenly realized that within 20 measures, he had brought us down incrementally so slow, and I never felt it. That we were back at the original tempo.
Right.
That's astounding. I mean, if you're at 10 beat faster, you know,
It's just
3, 4,
moving.
1, 2,
It's
3,
moving.
and now you're supposed to get back to 1, 2,
Right.
and the musicians themselves can't feel that.
Right. Sure.
That's
It's
incredible.
smooth. Yeah.
Okay, so things like that. The exhilaration of had a funny story with Madonna.
Right.
We started out at 2,000 seat arenas,
Wow.
which wasn't that big
Right, for her.
for her. You know, Seattle was the
Right.
first one. And by the end of the tour, we sold Madison Square Garden out 5 nights.
Right.
And then they did Radio City Music Hall, also sold out.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Sure.
Playboy and Penthouse
Sure.
had their exposés in the middle of that.
Sure.
I did a demo with a good friend of mine who's a great songwriter. He wrote the song, I didn't. It was called Crazy for You. And it was supposed to be used in this really crummy wrestling movie. And it looked like that was going to fall apart.
Right.
And then she put out Like a Virgin, right?
Right.
And I was sitting there, and I played on the demo. That's the
Right.
odd connection,
Sure.
right? And they were trying to stop it because they didn't want it to compete
Right,
with
with
her
the other-
album. And they
right,
were doing
since it's
everything
doing so well
they could.
to
And I
block
remember
it.
had a Time magazine, the phenomenon of Madonna.
Right.
They were like, what an incredible businesswoman. She's got a hit with this movie at the same time
Right.
that her record, and she's on the phone saying, get that taken off right now, Freddie. Freddie demand, get that off now. You know, just amazing things. So,
Yeah.
our first gig, they're worried she's going to swear and
Right.
cuss. And
Right.
so Seattle's mayor put out some edict that if she starts cussing a whole lot,
Really, that's it.
shut the show down.
Wow.
Now that she's nervous as it is,
Sure.
and the whole thing. So this is the truth. I'm with all my friends, and I'm thinking about this, you know,
Right.
and everybody's saying, "Do you think she's going to swear?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. I think she
Exactly.
will." Oh no, I'll bet you. I said, "Well, I'll take that bet. I'll take that bet. I'll take that bet." I was like, 5 guys, okay? I'm gonna $20 bets on each.
Exactly.
Well, what do? I go in there and say, "Break a leg."
Exactly.
I go, "You nervous?" She goes, "Of course I'm nervous. What the fuck do you think She goes, well, "What do you think I should do about this thing?" You know.
Right.
And I said, "You know what? Here's what you do. Walk out and go, 'Hey, Seattle, how the fuck are you?' And don't swear again. They can't shut you down."
Sure.
And she hugs me.
Right.
And she goes out, and we're all starting to play. And she goes, "Hello, Seattle, how the fuck are you?" And everybody goes crazy, and they stand up, okay? And she never swore anymore. And
awesome.
every guy's looking, "Hey, wait a minute."
Yeah,
you
you
know?
go talk.
So I got it.
Sure.
Hey, come on, give me your $20. Come
Exactly.
on. You know?
Wow.
It's a lot of good moments.
Right. Right.
Wonderful moments.
Brian McKnight, totally different type of
One of the
person.
most, hands down, might be the most talented person I've ever met. Just crazy talented. Just harmonies. You know, his brother is in the group Take 6, Claude.
Right. Sure.
Those harmonies are out of this world. In tune. Brian's such a good singer. He will never sing a track on a record and make an overdub.
Wow.
Won't do it.
And here's it all.
And I got to work with him on a couple things. I worked with a group called As Yet, and then he
sure.
had me on a record called Anytime.
Right.
I think one of the finest songs I've had the honor to arrange is something that he wrote for a friend that had died, and it was called When the Chariots Come. And I really could get evocative, going back to Jeff's thing about how, and you got it, when you're doing an arrangement behind a song, and I want anybody that's thinking of getting into this stuff, it can't be corny. It has to be subtle.
Right. And what do you mean by
subtle.
that, though? Let me tease that out. When you say it shouldn't be corny.
Okay, meaning if somebody says my heart is breaking, you can't go crack, crack.
Right. Oh, okay.
Okay, like, I'm using something so obviously
Right.
ridiculous.
Right.
You can't overdo it. It has to give a subtle. Within the song there was something where he said when Gabriel begins to blow his horn, and it was about a friend that had just passed.
Right.
Okay. The first time he said it, I had a cornet go ba ba da, like a blowing his horn. The second time I took the strings, like They were rising wind.
Right.
Okay?
Interesting.
And by the time you get to the end of it, and it had sort of almost a New Orleans kind of lilt to it. It was a bit of a drone. And I realized at the end, I wanted that to kind of swing. I had a couple of great friends from New Orleans. I spent a lot of time there. But he wanted orchestra too.
Right.
And so I had instruments kind of grooving to that at the bottom, and then I had instruments in the middle that played with no vibrato.
Right, just hold it.
Holding,
Right.
okay, woodwinds and stuff. And then I imagined that the chariots were up in a cloud
Right.
above us.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a repeating triplet line. And you hear that come in too. Now, most people probably wouldn't have gotten that at all.
Sure.
But
Right.
I'm surprised that some people come to me and they say, did it have something
Right.
to do with the chance? Yeah, that
Right.
did. That's when you know you've done your job well.
Right.
You've enhanced the song and you didn't step on it.
Right.
You didn't
right.
do something corny, to smash it.
Sure.
So, yeah. Okay.
We'll go to somebody contemporary, Ariana Grande,
Okay.
and working with her.
I didn't get to meet, well, you know what? I did sort of meet her. And she was young. So when you're that young,
Right.
you're gonna, I mean, here, I worked with Babyface for almost 10 years on a bunch of good stuff.
Right.
I worked with him on Michael Jackson and his own record, For the Lover in You, and I worked with him on Whitney Houston on 2 records, and I
Right.
worked with him, just a number of different things. And he wasn't there, and his engineer, Paul Bouton, is superb. He's a really good guy, too. Nice guy.
Right.
And he was giving her instruction, and like I said, I didn't get to meet her because I was picking the chart up.
Right.
But she was saying, well, maybe I think it's better. Maybe I don't want to do it. Maybe I,
Right.
and I was like, oh, God, she's going to learn.
Right.
He was dead on, too. She was flat in that passage
Right.
and stuff.
Sure.
And I've seen her, as she's grown and matured, and I'm sure she would probably be saddened by, thinking that she might have acted that way.
Right.
These are
Early
people that
on.
are
Right. They know what they're
top of
doing.
their game,
Right.
But so yeah, for that they hired me to do strings on Tattooed Heart,
Right.
and then I did I think it's called Honeymoon Highway, and then there was a great Christmas song that year, and they had me play on it and do strings on that. So I was early in her career.
Right.
I think the group that was producing and whatever, and that's what tends to happen too.
Right.
If you're with one group, you're getting work from Maurice, you're getting work
Right.
from Babyface. David hired me sometimes, stuff like
Right.
that. And then if it goes to another whole group of producers,
Right.
then
You-
you're in their
You
camp.
move on.
Brian was kind to me. I got to produce 2 records with him, and both were Christmas records. Okay, so but the first time I worked with him as a producer,
Right.
we did a take on "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas," and he was a huge Nat King Cole fan,
Right.
and he started that song with an interview with Nat's wife, and then he sang it just like Nat, and it was chilling how good it was.
Right.
Okay, so here I'm in the booth, and I had sequenced piano, and I have someone who I work with who's a tremendous musician and friend of mine. His name is Jimmy Randolph, and Jimmy had done the bass and some drum parts,
Right.
which is always, and I want to tell people, anybody's thinking about arranging and stuff, it's much better to have different energies. If you do all the parts, everything tends to kind of line up in the same sort of way. There's
Right.
magic in other people contributing to tracks.
And putting that part in.
And so here I am finally doing his vocal.
Right.
And he came in and he just nailed it. It was just brilliant. And I said, man, that is phenomenal. I think you rushed one line. Let's just pick up one thing. And everybody got nervous because I hadn't produced with him.
Right.
Okay. In fact, the first time I worked with him, it was as yet he'd written the track, and it was
Right.
Babyface's track, and he was
Right.
laughing, and I thought, doing a string quartet, what's he laughing at? He
Right.
must hate this shit.
Sure.
I said, can I change anything? And he goes, no. I said, well, I saw you laughing, and he said,
Sure.
I was astounded at
love
how
it.
good it was.
Right. Wow.
Okay. So he came in, he was mad. He goes, where is it? I said, there. He goes, I'm going to do the whole thing over. He did 2 more takes. It wasn't
Right.
close. That was the take, and who cared?
Right. How about that little part?
So that was his thing. He had to do Frank Sinatra. He wanted it from front to end.
Right. All the
And
time.
what was brilliant about that record, and very touching for me, I told you how much and by the way, I don't want to keep my mom out of this. I was born on her birthday, so she was inside my head. She could
All
ask
the
2
time.
questions and know what mischief I was up to.
Right.
Wonderful lady too. But my pop passed from mesothelioma, and he was suffering from it at the time. and I thought he had pneumonia and that he'd get through that and he'd have another year. And I had to break up after I'd done his vocal, and we added a harmonica solo, and Stevie was supposed to do it. And I've had 3 supposed Stevie sightings, and he's never showed up. I never had to work with him.
Sure.
And I've heard a lot of people say that. So we brought in this guy, Katalak Olsted, he's from Sweden.
Wow.
Marvelous singer, writer, and harmonica player. And he nailed it on the first take.
Right.
Just played beautifully. So we got Brian on a first take. We've got sequence tracks. We've got a harmonica solo on the first take, and now we're going to do strings, woodwinds. So we had to put the date off because my dad died. I came back, and he was a huge Sinatra and Nat King Cole fan too. And here I am in Capitol, and I just feel terrible, and I'm low. And everybody knows that my dad had passed. And another person I want to mention, and this is another thing that makes you look good, is I have somebody I work with all the time that does my contracting, does my copying, helps me at times make suggestions on arranging and stuff. Her name is Susie Katayama.
Sure.
She's got an incredible. You ought to interview her.
Sure,
She's worked with everybody.
Right.
Okay. And so as I walked in, like I said, I was really feeling terrible, and I looked up, and there's a picture of Nat King Cole singing in the very studio we're about to go.
Wow.
And remember, my dad loved him.
Right.
And I got on the stand, and everybody was offering condolences, and I said, thank you. I said, do me a favor. Put as much feeling into this as you can, okay?
Wow.
One take.
Got it.
So that record was all one take. I mean, that particular song, So.
In what way, and I think you've somewhat captured it with this last set of stories, but has music really been healing for you, going through something like that with your dad's death, but just also in getting over that? I was the rambunctious kid that had too much energy, so from the beginning all the way through, the passing of your father.
Loss. It hurt. It hurt. And I wrote a piece that's on my website that I'm really proud of. In fact, it got me a shot at doing the memoriam for the Emmys one year. And it's a piece called Passing Memories. And I put on there, it's 3 phases that a person goes through when they lose a loved one.
Right.
And phase 1 is the anxiety and fear and the moment of death. And then the second passage is like the main grief theme, the loss.
Right.
And then I bridge to the final one, which starts out with just myself playing acoustic piano, and it's the fond memories that replace and lessen the pain.
Sure.
Okay, so it's in 3 stages, and a lot of people have responded positively to it, and so yeah, that was cathartic doing that. That was. And that's the beautiful thing about music. You can express love for someone. I had a girlfriend who had dumped me unceremoniously, and there were a few hate songs in
Sure.
I did a record called The Color of the Truth. There were a couple of those,
Right, sure.
Perfect Crime,
Sure.
break a heart and just walk away.
Sure.
So what you don't want to do, I think, sometimes is get too, how can I say this, too consistently introspective and like every part of my life's so important. No,
Right.
Why not find things that you can connect with other people to?
That takes us to our last question. Music and medicine is the name of the show. To what extent do you feel that your music has been like medicine or has served in that way?
Toward me?
Whether it's towards you or the people that you hope to project it to.
I can tell you in moments that I feel bad sometimes, I'll go back and listen to some of the things that I think we really did well on and accomplished, and that feels good. My youngest son has the gift, if he really wants to, follow it. He's heavily addicted to video games, and he's really good at it. He's real bright. Okay, my oldest is going to get into sales, but he said to me, he said, "Man, if I can't make the video thing happen, I want to follow you in music." So hopefully it might serve as a little bit of an inspiration for him too.
Sure.
And it's always touching when people let me know that they appreciate my work. So it's been, how could that be anything but cathartic, right?
Sure.
I mean, I chose the right career,
Sure.
and I'm not done. I'm an old fart, but I have stuff I have to accomplish.
Sure. And shameless plugs here. Tell us about your website where we can find out more about what you're doing.
It's simple.
Some of the stuff to come.
I had to think hard on this.
Sure.
BillMeyersMusic.com.
Okay.
Meyers is Myers.
Absolutely.
So there's
Sure.
all kinds of examples of different stuff that I've got on there. I think the best thing I can say is I have extreme passion for a couple of new projects that I want to get. And I met someone in the 90s who's become a great friend, and he's a tremendous producer, and now he heads, I think he's VP at Sony Latin. His name is Ario Bacchiero. And Ario at one point started going into live production, but first I worked for him with a couple people, Alejandro Fernandez and a group called Sin Bandera, and I did string arrangements and things for him. And he hired me for both the Pan American Games, where I did the opening and closing ceremony music,
Right.
then the Central American Games. They're the ones that the United States doesn't get invited.
Right.
So there's a few medals left.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
And then the 150th anniversary, I wrote a ballet for that, and fireworks music
Right.
for Cinco de Mayo.
Right.
Okay. My ambition, and may never happen, but I want to be writing music for the Olympics in 28
Sure.
for
Awesome.
for LA. I
That'd
want to
be
have some hand in that.
Sure.
So that's one of my things, and I want to do a tribute to my friend and mentor Maurice White.
Sure.
So those are a couple.
Sure. Sure.
You know.
Absolutely. Well, this has been delightful,
Great.
and I appreciate you feeling comfortable to kind of go all the way back and
I'm
get into
quite
some of the
shy, as
stories.
you can
Right.
tell,
It's
but
hard to pull it out of you,
It's hard
but
to get anything out.
but you cooperated pretty well. Sure. Thanks.
man. Thank
A
you.
pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you. Really
Enjoy
appreciate it.
Welcome to Music and Medicine. Welcome to Music and Medicine. Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis.